How can we help our students become better writers? Moreover, how can our students make fewer grammatical errors? We hope this presentation will offer you some tools to approach grammar with your students. For starters, clarify your expectations regarding grammar prior to an assignment. It can be vague and overwhelming to ask students to write error-free. Try emphasizing what in particular you are looking for in regards to grammar. Common sentence-level errors such as comma splices, run-on sentences, and punctuation can be good starting places. Second, we cannot stress enough how important it is for your students to have opportunities for revision. It's really hard for students to both convey their ideas and edit for sentence-level errors in a single draft. Therefore, it is best for students to proofread for already discussed sentence-level errors in the second or even third drafts. We will later discuss different ways for how to offer opportunities for revision and scaffolding assignments in your course. Lastly, good writing has to do with much more than just correct grammar usage. In fact, often what we think of as correct grammar is actually an expectation of our students to write in and use what is commonly referred to as standardized English. Standardized English, the linguistic norm used in not only academic spaces but in our society, however, is implicated in racial bias. We'll talk more about this at the end of the presentation, but for now it is important to think about how much you want to emphasize grammar over other categories of assessment, such as critical thinking, analysis, and organization. Thus, we suggest that when assessing student work, grammar should not be weighed equally to other categories on a grading rubric, as it is often not reflective of the learning objectives of a given assignment.
Scaffolding. We all make mistakes in the first draft. This is part of the writing process. Break down writing assignments into multiple stages, especially for high-stakes writing. This helps students correct their mistakes on their own and makes your job easier. As writers ourselves, we are aware that writing goes through what writing scholars call the brouillon stage, the rough draft stage where ideas are in disorder and scrambled. Build this stage into your writing assignments so that students can work through their ideas. Studies show that students correct grammar errors on their own when multiple drafts are required. We want to help students activate this learning process instead of correcting the grammar error for them. Some suggestions for scaffolding. Assign first drafts that you collect but don't grade. Allow students to read and comment on each other's work. In other words, let them practice peer review editing. You can do this in the online format too, using Zoom breakout rooms or Google Docs. If there are common errors students are making, you can try to identify the mistakes together in class. Minimal marking. Again, let students correct their own errors. You can utilize these minimal markings. Or just circle or underline where the errors are and let students figure it out themselves. Is the meaning clear? When you do check for grammar, check for meaning. Punctuation, capitalization, correct conjugations, verb tenses, these kinds of small mistakes rarely get in the way of communication. Close grammar editing takes up your time and does not help students better communicate their ideas. Instead, when you do edit students' writing, which you should do sparingly, ask yourself, does this affect the meaning that the student is trying to communicate? If it doesn't, let it go. Prioritize critical thinking and clear communication over sentence-level errors. And again, don't forget to build self-correction into the writing process. One strategy is to give students an audience. Ask students to explain their ideas to each other or exchange paragraphs that explain their argument or the goal of their research paper. It will quickly become clear if their communication is effective and they can help each other clarify their meaning.
There is a difference between correct grammar usage, which is essential to clearly conveying meaning in a paper, and asking students to write in and uphold what is often referred to as academic or standardized English. We believe that it's important to address the difference between common grammatical errors and the rhetorical and linguistic preferences of our students. With this in mind, as educators, it is crucial to interrogate our own linguistic biases, especially when it comes to assessing student writing. First, it is important to acknowledge the connection between whiteness and what we often call standardized English. As standardized English is the dominant linguistic practice and discourse used not only in academic spaces, but in our society more largely, standardized English is seen as the linguistic norm, and in turn, other languages and variants on standardized English are often viewed as improper or incorrect. Standardized English, thus, is practiced by predominantly white people, and therefore cannot be disentangled from the racial inequalities in our country. So how does this translate into our classrooms? Well, more often than not, students who write in dialects other than standardized English are penalized for using incorrect grammar, and these students are disproportionately students of color. So, part of developing an anti-racist pedagogy is to really rethink our categories of assessment. These include clarity, articulateness, fluency, strength. For more on this, we recommend you check out composition rhetoric scholar Asao Inoi's Anti-Racist Writing Assessment Ecologies. A common question is, so shouldn't we just teach our students to write in academic or standardized English without saying it's necessarily better? What about code switching, the practice of switching between different Englishes depending on context or audience? Well, as a recent statement released by a panel of Black scholars on anti-Black linguistic racism for the Conference on College Composition and Community Right, as Black language speakers and scholars, we don't encourage code switching because it places whiteness and white mainstream English on a pedestal while showcasing Blackness and Black language as inferior, lesser, and secondary. Instead, we encourage, utilize, and elevate the beauty and brilliance in Blackness and Black language. So the impulse to teach students to translate their ideas into white linguistic practices in order to be recognized as successful in the university is a form of racism in our classroom that we should rethink. So where do we go from here? As we think about grammar from pragmatic and critical perspectives, we ultimately encourage you to interrogate your own linguistic biases and think forward for how to design your rubrics and assignments in ways that actively push against linguistic racism. For more reading on this, see the suggested readings over here. So after this presentation, we hope you take our suggestions for how to support the diverse linguistic practices of your students, while at the same time giving students tools for clarity through their own voices. We'd love to talk more with you about any questions you have about this topic. You can reach us at the following address. Thank you.